Welcome, viewers, again. Today's text is An Englishman's Home by Evelyn Waugh. And let me give you a very short introduction of the text. The text is written in 1940s and it is a satirical short story, and it also highlights the class hierarchy, hypocrisy, and social mobility of English culture or suburban life during the interwar period. This also suggests the writer's wit and critique of English society. The complex characters are also revealed through the text, and finally, the idealism and its failure of the protagonist, Mr. Beverly Metcalfe, is seen throughout the story. So, without wasting time, we are going to analyze the whole text step by step. So here is an actual blueprint of the text. Everything almost you can get here. And in this general blueprint of the text, I have selected five segments from narrative structure to the symbols and in between themes, characters, and imagery. So these are the factors we are going to deal with in this video. So stay tuned. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is to give you a point-wise summary of the text. And here in this video, we will refer to the text again and again so that you can get the help of the text, because textual examples are very necessary for writing your answer. This is, in a nutshell, the story is given. As we will proceed to the text and in the latter parts of the videos, the latter slides, you will learn that how interesting and complicated text is. So just the idea. And from here, we would like to move on to the next segment of narrative structure, because the whole story is given in this narrative frame. From the expository beginning to the resolution, expository suggests the intended to explain or describe something. And from this to the satirical development, conflicts and tension, climax, resolution, everything happened within this limited frame. So the limited framework is actually given for you to understand the narrative structure in a better way. From the expository beginning, the satirical development. Why satirical? Because there is indeed satire, because the writer, Evelyn Waugh, tries to satirize the whole section of English society. Now, one interesting factor is this, that in the text there are five sections. And here, as you can see, this is the first one where Mr. Beverley pens the text, and there are conversations, and it goes to this point. Here starts the second part. This is the third part. Here starts the fourth, and the last segment is the fifth. So, this is the narrative structure, and those are the five parts. You have to learn how, from the beginning to the end, so many aspects that are connected with each other and they need serious attention to understand. Moving on to the second section, that analytic points or analytical points, imagery and symbols. There are images of countrymen, social standing, idyllic pastoral life, threat of industrialization. These are four, but there are so many images filled with the text. Symbols are Mr. Westmacott's cows, the home, field, the garden, etc. These are the simple points that you have to understand, but don't worry, I am going to deal with each individual aspect in detail. Now, in case of imagery, there are several. The first one is countryside. There are several images, or there are several picturesque descriptions of the countryside. For example, let us move on to the first segment of the text. When Mr. Waverley Metcalfe tapped the barometer in the back hall and noted with satisfaction that it had fallen several points during the night. He was by nature a sun-loving man, but he believed it was one of the marks of true countrymen to be eternally in need of rain. So, countryside, rain, etc., that we all need rain, gardening, Boggett's conversation with Mr. Metcalfe, everything seemed to so to the point factor that they indicate nothing but the countryside. There are lots of images or lots of connected imagery which specifically point out the nature, the countryside. Now, I need your special attention here, for Mr. Metcalfe was but lately initiated into the cult of the countryside, and any features of still claimed his devotion. His agricultural process, its social structure, its vocabulary, its recreation, the aspect of it, glittering now under the cool May sunshine, fruit trees and flower, chestnut in full leaf, the ash burning, the sound and smell of it, everything, as you can understand, leading not but to the only countryside. So these are the imagery, these are the factors where you have to understand how countryside seem to be so pivotal in this text. Second one is home. Home is very significant image in this text because it is based on Englishman's home. So home therefore sounds so much promising aspect, and also the image stands out to be so satirical because through this satirical point of view, the narrator or the story writer indicates the aspect of emptiness, the aspect of pride. So home suggests the pride of the Englishman. So Englishman's home, in that case, home suggests a very significant point. Now, coming back to the text, let me introduce this line. He wanted a home, not a seat, and he reflected on the irony of the word. He thought of Lord Wakehurst, Wayne, whose property he sometimes liked to say his own marched. There was indeed 100 years of haha between this barrack and the Lord Wakehurst's pastures. Therefore, home needs significant attention because someone who is relying on the home, that belief actually reflects his idea of the home. Also, pride he feels in it. So, lands, pastures, home all are connected together and they are significantly or brilliantly putting forward a beautiful image. More significantly, if you go down in the text, at here it was exactly such a place as Mr. Metcalfe had dreamed of in the long years of the cotton trade in Alexandria. Mr. Metcalfe's own residence, known for generations by the singular name of Grumps, had been rechristened by a previous owner by much Malcock Hall. See here, again, the concept of home comes forward. Again and again, this concept of home throughout the text lingers here and there. So, the powerful image of home perhaps creates a backdrop or background in the text so that the image that you have to learn through the text, that image creates a conception about, or rather misconception about this particular idea of home in the text. So therefore home becomes a significant aspect again and again in the text. Now moving to the third imagery is the garden. So garden is also just like home, another significant image where you have to put your focus thoroughly. My concern is to go to the next segment, that means the part two. Just come here in this part two, and here just read the lines. Towards 11 o'clock, Mr. Metcalfe put aside crossword in the lobby by the garden door. He kept a variety of garden implements. See here, kept a variety of garden implements especially designed to the house of the elderly. Selecting from among them, one of them had newly arrived. He sauntered out into the sunshine and addressed himself to the plantains of the lawn. Tool had a handsomely bound leather grip, polished cane handle and a head of stainless steel. It worked admirably, and with a minimum of effort, Mr. Metcalfe had soon squared a large area with neat little pits. Someone who is very dear to the garden, someone who wants to nurture the garden, is significant here because home and the garden are side by side connected with each other, giving the same kind of feeling that they are the possessions. Just like the home, your pastures land, as well as you have gardens, that is significant because you are keeping something a very great possession. So keeping garden also suggests that you have a panache towards creating a huge aristocratic sense. So therefore garden seems here important aspect. Another example of garden is the end of the part one, where the line starts is here. He paused in the kitchen garden to nip in the bosom of some newly planted black currant, which must not be allowed to fruit that summer. Then his round finished, he pottered into breakfast. See here, again, kitchen garden, a reference again and again about the garden. So these are the actual references that you need to know. Moving on to the next image is the social standing. So social standing is something which is also a powerful image because Lady Peabury, who is also another significant landowner, and she is living in that land previously. So Lady Peabury has a larger garden, longer garden, and also she has a different kind of social standing, just like Mr. Metcalfe. As we have learned about Mr. Metcalfe, now because he is someone who is distinct and has a very soft corner for the land, pastures land, and home and garden, his social standing is different than the others, and he's thinking in that way. And because they have, I mean, Lady Peabury and Mr. Metcalfe have a quarrel among them, that is perhaps a reason why their social standing matters as an image. For example, in the second part here, for 15 years, Mr. Metcalfe had been president of British Chamber of Commerce. He had been greatly respected by the whole business community. No one could anything cross him, and he would not touch anything that was not above board. So this is a kind of social standing which suggests that Mr. Metcalfe is the lion of the Rotarians. So this is the social standing which seems to be so significant. And also, every character gives his or her best idea of reputation in the text. So social standing, therefore, seems to be a very significant part of this image. Now, moving on to the next segment as the threat of industrialization. This is also significant because threat of industrialization comes from somewhere at some point, which causes an image to give the idea that the pasture life is going to be destroyed. Let me give you the textual example here. In the second part, come here, here, Bill, it was a word, say here, build. It was a word so hideous that no one in Malcock dared to use it above a whisper. Housing scheme, development, clearance, council houses, planning, these obscene words had been expunged from the polite vocabulary of the district, only to be used now and then with the license allowed to anthropologists of the fierce tribes beyond the parish boundary. None of the horror was in their midst and mark of plague in the court of the Decameron. So here, development, clearance, these are the words which suggest the threat of industrialization. So something new is going to be built. The people who have bought the land, they are going to build something which is similar to the industrial revolution or which is similar to the industrialization. Now, industrialization comes again at the end of the second part, just beginning of the third part. Let me move to that part. Now, in this segment where Mr. Hargorhood is conversing with the colonel, and here he's saying, no, no, quite the reverse. See, I see, and you would be using your house for weekends. No, no, quite the reverse. I say, I and my staff will be working here all week, and it's not exactly a house I'm building, although, of course, there will be living quarters attached, perhaps, since we are going to be such close neighbors. You would like to see the plans. So he is willing to see the plans and Mr. Hagerhood is also willing to point out what they are planning. You never saw such a thing, said Colonel Hodge next morning to Metcalfe. An experimental, look here very carefully, an experimental industrial laboratory, he called it. Two great chimneys have to have those, he said, by law, because poison fumes, a water tower to get high pressure, six bungalows, or his staff ghastly, and etc., etc., and etc. So you see here, these are the examples from the text which suggest that the threat of industrialization is here at the very gate of Mr. Metcalfe and others to the villages. The pasture life is going to be end soon. Now, the last part of the imagery section is idyllic pastoral life. There are several examples that I have already said about this, that idyllic pastoral life are under threat and they are planning, they means that Mr. Hargood and his lawyer, where in turn you will find that the brother of Mr. Hargood is playing the role of the advocate. So here this idyllic pastoral life is present again and again through several images, through the imagery the writer tries to create an impression that there is, on the one hand, you have the pastoral life, on the other hand, that pastoral life is under threat. The whole scheme is something totally different. That is the satire at the end that we have to understand. Okay, so these are the images, these are the imagery factors: countryside, home, garden, social standing, threat of industrialization, idyllic pastoral life. So, again, moving on to the next slide symbols, and these three symbols that we have already discussed earlier, the English landscape, the garden, the home, these are also simultaneously working as a symbol or the symbols. The garden as a symbol of representation of natural world subdued and controlled by human hands. The home is also the symbol of decline and decay. So Waugh, particularly through home, he wants to suggest the social order and the very structure that should provide stability also hints at stagnation and decay, because that stability is going to be disrupted. It is a reflection. The home is rather a reflection, and in a symbolical way, the reflection of something stagnant, something dogmatic, and something that is going to be changed, or nothing but the English landscape's threat. So the landscape is under the threat of modernity because the intrusion of modernity is at hand. This is a simple explanation of the symbols of the English landscape. Another symbol is that the Mr. Westmacott's cow. It gives a connection to the rural agrarian lifestyle that Waugh contrasts against the artificiality of suburban modernity. And for that, let me show you the textual examples here, where the lovely valley is so soon to be defile lay resplendent in the sunset. Another year, thought Mr. Metcalfe, and his fresh green foliage would be choked with soot, withered with fumes. These mellow roofs and chimneys, which for 200 years or more had enriched the landscape below the terrace, would be hidden by functional monstrosities in the steel and glass and concrete. In the doomed field, Mr. Westmacott, almost for the last time, was calling his cattle. Next big building was to begin, and they must seek other pastures. So, in a manner of speaking, asked Mr. Metcalfe already. His desk was littered with house agents and notices, all for $500. Now, here lies the point of Mr. Westmacott's cattle. So, this is also simultaneous representation of a pastoral life, a rural simple life, and the upcoming doom. So, these are the symbols that you have to understand. Now, moving on to the another slide from the symbols, that significance of the ending. The ending of the text is very significant. First, let us get to the ending part. This is the part 5. The scouts are badly in need of a new heart, and the end that we learned, the land was sold. Mr. Metcalfe contributed $500. 250 was contributed by Mrs. Faberry, the widow, and the others are giving somehow. But the endings points out that Mr. Harcourt Hood and his brother, he and his lawyer, see here, he and his lawyer drove away to their home beyond the hills. The lawyer was Mr. Harcourt Hood's brother. Quick, a pretty fine joke. I thought for once we are going to be left with the baby. The trip to Mr. Harcourt Hood's home, a double quadrangle of mellow brick that was famous far beyond the country. They plot the whole idea. Now, this, however, is significant as well as poignant. Why? Because the ending suggests the irony in it. The whole thing is ironical. Why these people are involved, why there is a controversy, why there is that tragic flow, why there is that climax point. Everything was just for doing nothing. It was a trick. The irony lies in the fact that Mr. Harcourt Wood, from the very beginning, plans to rebuild it, and they are planning to sell their land to get the higher probability, the higher value. They have planned it in that way to build industrial titan over there with chimneys, etc. and etc. See, this is therefore ironical. The ending is also epiphanic. Epiphanic means that there is a twist. All of a sudden, you have the twist at the end. Now, the twist is very shocking because we have no idea from the beginning to the end, or at least before going to the end, that Mr. Harcourt Hood can be that treacherous person who has planned with his brother, who apparently acts as the lawyer of Mr. Harcourt Hood. They have taken everything. It was their business. It is the planning. They are planning, and they have done it so easily. So this is epiphanic, the sudden twist. All of a sudden, we have a realization. Oh my God, this finally happens. The ending is the revelation of the nature of the complex human personality. So someone like Mr. Metcalfe, whom we are thinking as a true general spirit of countrymen, actually he is nothing because he doesn't understand even the point of Mr. Harcourt Hood and what is beneath it. Therefore, it is a revelation of the complex characters as well as the backdrop of the complex characters, that means the characters of others. Finally, it is a sharp satire of the countryside as well as England, or the society of pastoral England. The satire indicates that this is a life where you have to understand. Now, let me move to the last part again. Now, look at the ending of the text. Well, that has settled schedule for A for another year and left something over clearing the fish ponds. That it was an anxious month. I shouldn't care to go through it again. We must be more careful next time, Jock. How about moving east? Together, the two brothers unfolded the inch ordnance map on Norfolk, spread it on the table of the great hall, and began the preliminary expert search for a likely, unspoiled, well-loved village. See here, they have spoiled it down, and nobody understands a bit. The satire is here that this is the English brilliance, that if you are so much patriotic about your land, about your country, about your the actual life of village, you are not patriotic, rather you are an idiot. There lies the satire. So someone is doing something and you have no idea about it. You are simply just flowing with the tide. And because you are thinking that you are doing a great job, actually, in reality, it is not a great job. You are just stepping into the trap that is lying for you by others. So that is the satiric movement of the text. Now, moving on to the next part, and that is the significance of the garden. Garden is significant in many ways. First of all, Evelyn Wong's Englishman of the garden is a powerful symbol of control and tradition, as I have already said, reflecting the protagonist's attachment to an orderly and idealized version of rural English life. However, the garden as a symbol of tradition. Now, every house has to have a garden, and that is significant. Why? Because in the text there are references. Let me show you. This is in the part 2 where Mr. Metcalfe goes to Lady Peabury for consultation, and here he must consult Lady Peabury. It was a three-quarters of a mile to the house. The lane ran past the gate, which have access to wet Macclesfield's crazily hung elm gate and deep cow-trodden mud, sown in Mr. Metcalfe's imagination to give place to golden private and red gravel. So the pasture life, the pastures or the greenery, that is significant because there is a huge land, and Lady Peabury is the oldest perhaps villager of the area. Let me slip back to another part, that is the part 4. And in this whole passage, you have to understand this part where she was too old now to begin another garden to make other friends. See, this is therefore mandatory. This is traditional that you have to make new garden with your new area. So wherever you are going, wherever you are building your house, you have to make a garden. Again, come at the end, the part 5, I believe. And here, read this line. On the days when the gardens were open to the public, record crowds came to admire the topiary work, use and boxes of prodigious size and fantastic shape, which gave perpetual employment to three gardeners. See, this is significant. This line is very significant because the tradition is indeed indicated through this line because garden is significant. Let me give you another example. First part is significant for gardens. At the very beginning, as we have seen, Mr. Metcalfe is talking about gardens, or with Boggett, the garden of Mr. Metcalfe. Lady Peabury lived at Mark Melcock House, whose chimneys, soon to be hidden in the full foliage of summer, could still be seen among budding limes on the opposite slope of the valley. 4 acres of meadowland lay between her property and Mr. Metcalfe's, where Ostmaker's farm had enriched the landscape and counterbalanced the slightly sunburned splendor of the flower gardens. See, therefore, gardens, flower gardens, kitchen garden, all types of gardens are significant because this is traditional. The garden is also as a control. The examples that I have shown previously, all of the examples are also showing or pointing out that these gardens are a symbol of control, because if you have larger gardens, if you have beautiful gardens, you have the control over others. You have the control over the pasture life. You also have the controls over your England rural lifestyle. You are a British, and your customary ideas are reflected through the nurturing of your garden. So this is significant because this garden is also qualifying as the controlling authority, as proving someone is controlling authority because someone has the garden. The garden is also a contrast to modernity. Why? Because modern chimneys and etc. The last example, let me remind you the last example. Here, Lady Peabury is living in a Matchmalcock house, see here, whose chimneys soon be hidden in the full foliage of summer. So it is not important whether your chimneys are working properly or not. It is significant indeed that full foliage of summer will be seen. So naturally, the garden is a contrast to modernity because you are nurturing something which is pure, which is healthy, which is fresh. The garden is also the reflection of the characters. The kind of garden that you are having is also reflecting your characters. And to understand that, let me refer back to the end of the part 1. Here you have another idea of the garden. Mrs. Hornbeam attended church, and Mr. Hornbeam was quite knowledgeable about vegetables. See, in fact, had they preferred a tennis court to their herb garden, and had Mr. Hornbeam possessed an evening suit, they might easily have mixed with their neighbors on terms of ostensible equality. See here, Mr. Hornbeam attended church, and Mr. Hornbeam was quite knowledgeable about vegetables. The vegetable garden, the herb garden. So this reflects their nature, their characters. Mr. Metcalfe's garden, see, looking back to the previous one, to the first point, and very at the very beginning of the text, where Mr. Boggett, the gardener, was not particularly old and knew very little. The seeds he planted seldom grew. He wrought stark havoc whenever he was allowed to use the pruning knife. His ambition in horticulture went no further than the flattering the largest possible pumpkin, but Mr. Metcalfe regarded him with a simple reference of peasant for trees. Mr. Metcalfe likes to be a gardener. Mr. Metcalfe likes to possess a garden, and therefore Boggett is here appointed as the gardener, and he regarded him with the simple reference of peasant for priest. Mr. Metcalfe was but lately initiated into the cult of countryside, and any features of still claimed his devotion. It's agricultural processes, its social structure, its vocabulary, its recreations, etc. So this is the garden, and the garden reflects the idea of the character. Thus, this is the significance of the garden. These are the points of the significance of the garden. Now, moving on to the next slide, where we have to understand significance of the home, where the central focus of the story lies. The first is that symbolic significance home, and about which we have already slightly discussed with textual examples. Again, from just at the middle of the first part, and here, Mr. Metcalfe's own residence, known for generations by the singular name of Grumps, had been rechristened by a previous owner as Melcock Hall. It bore the new name pretty well. It was a dignified Georgian house. Look at the description. It was a dignified Georgian house of mellowed Cotswold stone. Four recept, six principal bed and dressing rooms replete with period features. The villagers, Mr. Metcalfe observed with regret, could not be induced to speak of it as a hall. Bogart always said that he walked up to Grumps, but the name was not Mr. Metcalfe's choosing, and it looked well on his note paper. It suggested a primacy in the village that was not undisputed. So, home is symbolic in the sense it reflects the pride, it reflects arrogance. Sometimes it also reflects that I have something which the others may not have, or purely the others do not have. Home here, a personal possession, your own self is reflected through your home. Therefore, the home becomes symbolic because home gives you that treasure. Home gives you that nest, the feeling of coziness, the feeling of something that I am capable of. So, that is the significant point of home. Second significant part is that the reflection of comfort and complacency. It is in the last segment of part two where there is a conversation between the Colonel Hodge and Mr. Hargood. So this is the conversation where I own the manor. My garden backs onto the Westmacottsville, the one you haven't bought. Oh, said Mr. Hargood. Was he called Westmac? I didn't know. I leave all these things to my lawyer. I simply told him to find a suitable, secluded site for my work. He told me last week he had found one here. It seems very suitable, but he didn't tell me anyone's name. And here, any particular reason? No, but I think perfectly charming. He added politely, there was a pause. I wanted to talk to you, said Colonel, etc. Another pause. I'm afraid you won't find it a very healthy sight down in the hollow there. I never mind things like that. All I need is seclusion. So home, therefore, is an idea of seclusion, is an idea of complacency, is an idea of comfort. Therefore, reflection of comfort and complacency is here significant. Now, this home is the under threat, and because it is under threat, when the home is under threat, you cannot perhaps rest at ease. In this part, that couldn't rightly say, but I reckon it to be built is itself a house. See the difference between house and home. Build it was a word so hideous that no one in Melcock dared to use it with whisper. That example that I have already given. But there is the threat of industrialization, and home is under threat. And because the home is under threat, the pasture life is also under threat, the garden is also under threat, and the reaction is imminent. Just go down to the fewer lines. No, at least is there's another four pence gone astray on the credit side this time, which makes it more worrying. But that isn't what came about. It is something that threatens our whole lives. See, it is something that threatens our whole lives. They are going to build a West Field. Briefly, but with emotion, he told everybody what he had seen. So this is the threatening factor. And the conclusion goes to this. Here, we are all equally threatened, said Mr. Metcalfe. I think we ought to act together. Hodge won't be any too pleased when he hears the news. We are all equally threatened because something new is going to be built here. Now our pastures are going to be destroyed. So home is going to be destroyed. Therefore, home is under threat. And again, the threat comes to be a very interesting factor at the end of the text. However, the next segment is that class and social status. The social status is also act as an image. In the part of image, you have already found it. Or we have already discussed it in the part of image, the social standing. So home gives an impression of your class and social status. Your standard belongs to the nature of your home, belongs to the exposition of your home, the way you present or represent your home to the other people. The next part is that emotional significance for the home. So, your emotion is typically attached to your home. Emotional part comes at the point at the end of the part two through Metcalfe's letter to Mrs. Beebery. And here is the example. At the end of part two, this is just at the beginning of part three, and here Beverly Metcalfe is writing letter to Lady Beebery. Here, I beg to inform you that I have been in communication with Mr. Hargett, who the purchaser of the field which separates our two properties and his legal representative. As Colonel Hodge has already informed you, Mr. Hargett would proposes an experimental industrial laboratory fatal to the amenities of the village. As you are doubtless aware, work has not been commenced, and Mr. Hargood is willing to resell the property if duly compensated. Because you are emotional, you are trying your best or level hard to get the property not to be sold here or not to be reactivated to build any industrial aspect or industrial item. The price proposed is to include repurchase of the field, legal fees, and compensation for the architects. But the young blackguard has us in a cleft stick. He wants $500. It is expensive, but I am prepared. See here, it is expensive, but I am prepared to pay the half of it if you will pay the other half. So I am fully aware of the pay. I am also aware that this is too much expensive, but I'm ready because I have an emotion connected to home. I have also the emotion connected to the pasture life of rural life of that have act of the war is here. The countryside is going to be destroyed. The industrialization is coming inside. Everything is happening, and my home is going to be snatched away from me. My land is also going to be snatched away. But here I stand alone if no one else is here. So that is the emotional part of home. Now, finally comes to the part of the characters. These are the characters we have in the text. Mr. Metcalfe, Lady Peabury, Colonel Hodge, Mr. Hargood Hood, the Hornbeams, Mr. Westmacott, Lord Breckhurst. We are not going to deal with every character because not everyone is important. However, I have given you here a short sketch of all the characters. Mr. Metcalfe, Lady Peabury, Colonel Hodge, and to the end of Mr. Westmacott, Lord Breckhurst. Everyone is here in a nutshell, and about everyone, I have given certain informations in this slide. So, if you need who is this or who is whom, you have to understand this. For example, picking up a general or casual random example, the Hornbeams, Mr. and Mrs. Hornbeam, who largely act as one unit, are a pretentious and self-absorbed couple who live in the old mill and have no children. Mr. Metcalfe accounts them among his wealthy neighbors. Let me get another one. Colonel Hodge. Colonel Hodge is another one of Mr. Metcalfe's opinionated neighbors. Unlike the rest, he has relatively little money, but he has history with and a good reputation in the local community through his involvement with the British Legion and the Boy Scouts. So, in that way, I have given little informations about every character. So, the earlier slide and in the next slide, this. So, in these two slides, if you can compare, the first one is giving you the name of the characters and the second one with the name little description. But we are going to deal here with the first character, the significant character, and the central character. That is the portrayal of the protagonist, Mr. Metcalfe. Now, Waug's portrayal in Englishman's of Mr. Metcalfe is both satirical and sympathetic, representing both the virtues and vulnerabilities of traditional English identity. Here is a symbol of traditional English values. Mr. Metcalfe is an example of traditional English values. Why? To the first page of the text. Here, Mr. Beverly Metcalfe tapped the barometer on the back hall and noted with satisfaction that it had fallen several points during the night. He was, by nature, a sun-loving man, but I believed it was one of the marks of a true countryman to be eternally in need of rain. See, true countryman. See, he thinks himself has to be the true countryman, and he has the nature of a true countryman, but this true countryman also needs certain intelligence. The amount of intelligence he needs, that is completely a failure in the text. However, Traditional English values are also filled in different parts found in the text. In the part two of the text here, Mr. Metcalfe left the house abruptly, almost precipitately, and all that evening he slept. For 15 years, Mr. Metcalfe had been president of British Chamber of Commerce. See here, there is a detailed description of Mr. Metcalfe. He had been greatly respected by the whole business community. No one could put anything across him, and he would not touch anything that was not overboard. Egyptian Levantine merchants who tried to interest Metcalfe. His shady business went away with a flea in the ear. It was no good trying to squeeze Metcalfe. That was his reputation in Union Club. See, this is Beverly Metcalfe, the protagonist of the text. He is also a representation of alienation because he is alienated when Mrs. Peabody rejected Mr. Metcalfe in the conversation of buying the land. Felt dejected. He was all alone. He wanted to do something by himself. So he was also another representation of the alienation. He is alienated in the whole society. And there is one example in the text. Just in the same segment previously, in this paragraph, opinion had hardened. Here, Metcalfe has got us into this hole, but not buying the field in the first place. It's up to him to get us out of it. So it is about Metcalfe. He is the sole responsible person according to other villagers. It is not at all correct. Mr. Metcalfe was alienated because of this reason. So he is just an object of satirical or critique or satire. Is a blend of heroism and pathos. Pathos, we have already understood why heroism, because he acts as a hero because there is heroism in him, and also pathos because he was the sole person who first thinks that danger is coming, and therefore he immediately rushes to Lady Peabody to discuss about this idea, buying the land or doing something for the land. So there, this is the heroic nature of Mr. Metcalfe. On the other hand, pathos is here because he doesn't understand what is happening actually. A figure of nostalgia and resistance. Nostalgia because he's thinking a lot about land, because he has only idea about land and still he doesn't leave that idea from him. And resistance is that yes, something he has to do. Example of resistance we have already seen in the text where he writes a letter to Lady Peabody that he is willing to pay the half if Lady Peabody is also willing to pay the half to buy the land. So this is the resistance and the victim of modernity, because Mr. Hargood and his brother are planning this from the very beginning. So Mr. Metcalfe doesn't really understand what is actually happening. So a victim of modernity because modern tendencies are gradually incoming naturally. That is significant for Metcalfe's life. Metcalfe doesn't understand that lead at all. So these are the factors, these are the characteristic features of the protagonist. These are the peculiar aspects of Beverly Metcalfe, the protagonist of the text. The other characters that you can learn, I have given in the resources, the URLs. From there, you can learn the characters which are mentioned earlier. However, let us move on to the next segment, that the title of the story. The title is, as we have already understood, An Englishman's Home. The reference to the proverb, as we have understood, that the Englishman's home is a castle. That proverb and proverb is already discussed. Because why the castle? Because it reflects the strength, it reflects the idea, it reflects the pride, arrogance, etc. So this works as a castle. Reference to the proverb. Ironic undermining of the concept, because Englishman's home is not a home, because home is always under threat. It is not a cultural issue, rather it is a probable aspect of the contemporary England, because the threat of war was also there. So ironic undermining of the concept is also there in the title, we have understood. Critic of cultural obsession. So culturally obsessed, if you are culturally obsessed about the garden, about the home, about the pastoral life, about everything, these factors we have already discussed. So here the title, you can learn from the other sides too. The materials I have already given you, the materials I have already talked about it. I have selected the passages, I have selected the lines, so there you can get the materials what you need for the title of the story. I have given only the points here so that it will help you out. So critics of cultural obsessions, the culturally obsessed, they are culturally obsessed, people are culturally obsessed. Naturally, the title indicates this. And finally, it is the commentary on isolation. Isolation of whom? Isolation of the protagonist, isolation of the British people, isolation of the countryside. So this is the title of the story in a very short idea, but in fact, it is not a very short idea. I have already given the ideas earlier, therefore it seems to you shorter. Now moving on to the questions part. These are the questions that I have collected for you so far, and each question is marked in yellow color. What is the point? The marks are also given on the right side. So these are the questions: home, ending, irony, economic, social class, title, portrayal of the protagonist, social and cultural anxieties of its time, imagery, etc. Every question has been answered in the slides. So just be careful about it, and that will be all. Now, finally, these are the resources, that the URL that you can copy and paste all of these URLs. I will give you the PDF version of this, so you can copy and paste the URLs to get your extra materials. These are the resources. Just help yourself out if you want to know better. And finally, thank you very much for watching this video. This I should not make a large one, but indeed it happens perhaps. Okay, stay tuned in your life. Be healthy, stay healthy. Thank you very much.